What happens when a country legend walks onto a stage expecting small talk and instead steps straight into an ambush of daytime TV? The View's studio that morning meant for polite small talk. Reba McEntire stepped onto the set of The View, expecting laughter, maybe a few tough questions, and a quick plug for her new album. Instead, she found herself face to face with Joy Behar, the queen of confrontation. And within minutes, what should have been a friendly chat turned into live television chaos. Every word Joy threw was meant to sting. Every answer from Reba hit back harder. By the time Whoopi realized what was happening, it was already too late. The studio wasn't just hosting a conversation anymore. It was hosting a reckoning. Trust me, this talk show won't disappoint you. It'll be worth every second of your time. The studio lights came up bright and hot, bouncing off the polished glass desk at the center of The View. The crowd was already buzzing, their applause echoing like a storm of anticipation. Whoopi Goldberg leaned forward with her familiar warmth, waving to the cameras. "Good morning, everybody," she said, her voice carrying that easy confidence of someone who's done this 1,000 times. "We've got a special guest joining us today, country music royalty herself." The audience erupted again. Even through the noise, Joy Behar's smile looked a little too sharp, a little too rehearsed. Her eyes flicked to the guest chair like a chess player eyeing her next move. The doors opened, and Reba McEntire stepped onto the stage. Radiant, composed, unmistakable. She wore a black blazer that shimmered slightly under the studio lights, her red hair falling perfectly into place. She waved to the crowd with that trademark Southern charm, her smile effortless but grounded. Whoopi stood to greet her, giving her a quick hug. Sunny and Alyssa followed with polite smiles. But Joy? Joy stayed seated, clapping slowly, lips pursed in a grin that didn't reach her eyes. "Welcome to The View, Reba," Whoopi said as they all settled in. "It's not every day we get country royalty at this table." "Well, thank you kindly for having me," Reba said. "It's an honor." The exchange was friendly on the surface. Polite laughter, cue cards flipping, camera pans across smiling faces. But something underneath was already off. Maybe it was the tone in Joy's voice. Maybe it was the way Reba's smile lingered just a beat too long. Either way, the energy was about to turn. Joy leaned forward, elbows on the desk, her voice calm but carrying a faint edge. "So Reba," she began, "in an industry full of auto-tune and TikTok fame, does real talent even matter anymore?" The audience laughed lightly, thinking it was just banter. But Reba didn't blink. She kept her smile, but there was a flicker in her eyes. "Well," Reba replied, her southern drawl smooth but steady, "I guess it depends who you ask, the fans or the algorithms." Joy gave a little laugh, short and cold. "So, you're saying talent still exists online? That's cute." The tension was almost visible now. Whoopi shifted in her chair, shooting Joy a quick side-eye like a silent warning. "Don't do this today." But Joy didn't care. She could sense a reaction coming, and she wanted it. Reba's posture straightened. Her voice softened, but there was steel underneath. "I'm saying talent doesn't need your permission to exist." For a full second, no one spoke. The air in the studio tightened, and a conversation stops being an interview and starts being a standoff. Whoopi glanced toward the producer booth again, mouthing something about commercial, but it was too late. The spark had already hit the wire. The crowd was still clapping when Joy Behar shuffled her cue cards. The corners of her mouth curved into that familiar grin, the kind that promised trouble. Reba, still glowing from the warm introduction, gave a polite nod toward the hosts. For a second, the studio felt calm again, the kind of quiet that comes right before thunder. Joy tapped her notes against the table, leaning in with that mix of curiosity and challenge she was famous for. "You know, Reba," she began, voice dripping with a little too much sugar, "back in your day, artists earned their place. They worked their way up, paid their dues. Now it seems like anyone can post a video and call themselves a star." Reba's smile didn't fade, but it changed. Softer, tighter, like a door closing slowly. She didn't break eye contact. "And yet," she said, her tone even but sharp enough to cut the air, "millions listen." "Maybe the audience is smarter than you think," the audience murmured. It wasn't applause this time. It was that low hum of people realizing something just shifted. Joy gave a short, dismissive laugh. "Please," she said, waving a hand like she was brushing dust off her shoulder. "Half of them can't even sing live." Without missing a beat, Reba shot back. "Neither could half the people your network promotes." It hit the table like a crack of lightning. A few gasps broke out in the crowd. One of the stagehands flinched off camera. Even Whoopi let out a quiet, "Oh boy," under her breath. Joy blinked, caught off guard, but not ready to back down. She straightened her papers, trying to look unfazed. "Well," she said carefully, "that's one way to look at it." Reba leaned in, elbows on the table now, her voice low but dangerous. "You confuse visibility with vanity, Joy. There's a difference." The tension was thick enough to taste. Joy's grin faltered. The audience fell silent again, every eye locked on the two women. Joy tilted her head, lips curling into a smirk that barely hid the bite behind it. "Well, not everyone," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm, "had a whole team polishing their boots and writing their songs." The air in the studio thickened. Reba's smile vanished. Her eyes flashed, a hard, unmistakable glare that could stop a fight in its tracks. "Team?" she repeated slowly. "My first team was my mama praying I made it home safe after singing in bars full of drunks." Joy's smirk faltered, but only for a second. The crowd reacted, a few gasps breaking through the silence. Reba wasn't raising her voice, but the weight behind her words hit harder than any shout could. "I sang until my throat bled," Reba continued, her southern drawl sharpening with every syllable. "I drove cross-country in a busted car with no heater. I slept in truck stops and ate peanut butter sandwiches 3 days straight just to get to the next gig. So Joy, don't talk to me about teams." I was the team. Joy forced a chuckle, her tone turning defensive. All right, she said, waving her hand. "No need to make it dramatic." Reba pushed back her chair and stood. The motion alone drew every eye in the room. "Dramatic," she said, her voice steady but lethal. "Don't lecture me about paying dues. I've played for 6 people and a barking dog. You played for a camera that never told you no." The audience erupted into uneasy laughter and gasps. Joy's cheeks flushed deep red. "Oh, please," she scoffed, crossing her arms. "You're just bitter that the spotlight moved on." Reba took a step closer, the heels of her boots clicking softly against the studio floor. "The spotlight didn't move, Joy," she said quietly, each word cutting deeper. "You just can't stand that it shines on someone else." The silence that followed wasn't just awkward, it was electric. You could almost hear hearts pounding in the control room. Joy opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Reba didn't need to say another word. She'd already won that round. Joy leaned back now, her grin widening like a blade. "You country folks sure take yourselves seriously," she said, her voice dripping with mockery. "Maybe loosen the boots a little." The room tightened instantly. Reba didn't even flinch. Her expression went cold, sharp. "And maybe tighten your respect," she said evenly. A ripple of laughter broke from the audience, half nervous, half thrilled. It was the kind of moment that made producers hold their breath. They knew they were watching something that could either make history or get censored. Joy's smirk flickered but didn't fade. "Oh, come on, princess," she said, waving a dismissive hand. "Don't act so sensitive." That word, princess, hung in the air like a slap. Reba froze. Slowly, her head turned, eyes narrowing. "What did you just call me?" Joy hesitated, a flicker of doubt in her face. "You heard me," she said, trying to sound confident but not quite pulling it off. Reba leaned forward, elbows on the table, her voice low and deliberate. "You know, honey, where I'm from, people say princess when they've run out of real arguments." The crowd reacted. A low, collective ooh rippled through the studio. Joy's jaw tightened. Whoopi shifted in her seat, one hand already raised toward the camera crew. "All right, maybe it's time we—" Reba didn't even glance her way. Her eyes stayed locked on Joy. "Not yet, Whoopi," she said calmly. "I want her to finish what she started." The air was thick enough to choke on. No laughter now, no polite applause. Just the heavy silence of 2 women circling each other. One desperate to keep control, the other daring her to try. Reba didn't wait for another insult to fly. She stood, steady and unflinching, her voice cutting through the air like a blade. You want to talk battles, Joy? Let's talk battles. The audience went dead quiet. Joy blinked, trying to keep her smirk, but it was already slipping. I've buried friends, Reba said, her tone low but shaking with something real. I've lost bandmates in a plane crash and still had to walk out on stage 3 months later with a smile so the crowd wouldn't see me break. I've rebuilt my career more times than you've rewritten a punchline. Each sentence landed like thunder. Even the cameras seemed to hesitate, unsure if they should zoom in or back away. Reba wasn't performing now. She was confessing, every word heavier than the last. Joy shifted in her chair, voice tight. Don't make this about tragedy, Reba. This is television. Reba's eyes snapped toward her, and the temperature in the studio seemed to drop 10 degrees. No, Joy, she said, her voice slicing through the silence. This is truth. And truth doesn't care about your airtime. A few audience members gasped. One person even clapped before stopping mid-applause. Reba took a step closer, her hand resting on the edge of the table. You mock from safety, she said quietly, but the words hit like gunfire. I built from pain. That's the difference between a critic and a creator. Joy swallowed, her mouth half open, but no words came out. For once, her trademark quick wit had nothing to reach for. Reba stood there, calm now, her voice softer, but even more dangerous. You sit here every day and tear people down for sport. But me? I stand up in front of thousands of people who came to feel something. That's what art is, Joy. Making people feel. You might not respect that, but you'll remember it. The crowd didn't move. And for the first time since she'd walked onto that stage, Reba McEntire wasn't the guest anymore. She was the storm. Joy shot up from her chair so fast her microphone cord snapped against the table. Her voice trembled, part rage, part disbelief. You think you're untouchable because you sing sad songs? Reba didn't move. She looked up at Joy with that calm, dangerous composure only years of surviving storms could build. No, Joy, she said evenly, her accent cutting through the air like a whip. I'm untouchable because I earned the right to stand tall while others tried to cut me down. That line hit like a gunshot. The audience gasped. Some even applauded before realizing this wasn't the kind of moment where clapping felt safe. Reba leaned slightly on the desk, her eyes never leaving Joy's. Tell me, Joy, she said, her tone almost conversational but sharp as glass. What have you built that can't be canceled with a remote? Joy's jaw locked tight. Her eyes darted toward the camera, then back to Reba. At least I'm honest, she shot back, voice rising. Reba didn't flinch. She tilted her head, almost pitying. No, she said quietly. You're loud. There's a difference. A single laugh escaped somewhere in the crowd, nervous, unsure if it was allowed. Whoopi muttered something under her breath, but no one heard her over the tension swallowing the air. Then it happened. Joy's hand slammed the desk, the sound cracking through the studio like thunder. Papers flew. Mugs rattled. Maybe you just can't take criticism, she shouted, her voice breaking at the edges. Reba didn't even blink. She took a slow step forward, her voice calm and deliberate. And maybe, she said, each word landing heavy and cold, you can't recognize decency. The studio fell into a silence so deep it felt physical. Even the cameras seemed to hesitate, their red lights blinking like they were unsure whether to keep recording. Whoopi lowered her gaze, whispering a soft, Lord have mercy, under her breath. No one dared move. Reba and Joy stood there, two women inches apart, pride against pride, truth against ego. Joy's hands were still trembling, but her voice had lost its bite. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the cameras. You're right, she said, her words coming out small, shaky. I was picking a fight. Reba studied her for a moment, then nodded slowly, the edge in her voice softening. Just a touch. Well, she said, her lips curling into something between pity and respect. You picked the wrong cowboy to rope in. The line broke the tension like a crack of dry humor in a thunderstorm. Even Whoopi exhaled, shoulders dropping slightly. Joy laughed once, nervously. Guess I did. She rubbed her temples, the fire in her tone finally burning out. I forgot what it's like to listen. Reba didn't miss a beat. Then maybe today's a good day to remember. Joy let out a long breath, her shoulders sagging as if the weight of the argument had finally caught up with her. For the first time since the camera started rolling, she looked less like the confident talk show host and more like a person realizing she'd gone too far. Reba sat back down, her tone shifting again, warm, steady, almost forgiving. You know, she said, resting her hands on the table, I've got more stories about those kids you mocked. You might learn something from them. Joy met her eyes and nodded slowly, this time without sarcasm. Then teach me. And just like that, the storm that had torn through the studio began to calm. The same two women who had nearly ripped each other apart on live television now sat across from one another in uneasy peace, one humbled, the other gracious. The crowd stayed silent, not wanting to break the spell. Because everyone in that room knew they'd just witnessed something rare. Not a fight, but the start of understanding. The lights dimmed just a little as the tension finally melted into something quieter, something almost tender. Joy leaned forward, elbows on the table, her voice soft but steady. You know, she said, glancing toward the camera, when you dismiss someone's art, you're not just criticizing their work, you're dismissing their fight. The audience went still again, but this time it wasn't fear holding them quiet. It was respect. Reba nodded, her tone calm and grounded. And when you defend your people, she said, a faint smile tugging at her lips, you find your voice again. The two women looked at each other for a long second. No hostility, no ego, just two people who'd fought their way to understanding. Joy let out a shaky laugh, eyes glistening. Guess we both hit the right notes today. Reba grinned. Except mine went platinum. The crowd erupted, breaking into cheers and laughter, the release everyone had been waiting for. Whoopi wiped her eyes, smiling in relief. Sunny clapped. Even Joy laughed for real this time. No sarcasm, no walls, just laughter. The show wrapped, the credits started to roll, and cameras caught one last shot of the two women still talking, still smiling, like old rivals who had finally dropped their guard. By that evening, Reba's closing line was everywhere. Screens lit up across Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram with one quote, "Respect isn't a genre, it's a choice." Within hours, hashtag #RebaVasJoy was trending worldwide. Commentators called it the most powerful talk show confrontation in years. But for millions watching at home, it wasn't just TV drama. It was a moment of truth. Two women went to war on live television and somehow walked away with something bigger than victory, mutual respect. And that's how one of the most explosive moments in daytime TV turned into a masterclass in grace, honesty, and redemption. What started as a clash became a reminder that respect still matters, even when the cameras are rolling. What do you think? Did Reba go too far, or did Joy finally get the reality check she needed? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every one, and if you love stories like this, hit subscribe and ring the bell to catch the next unforgettable showdown right here.